without further ado, can you please give Inspector Matt and Mr. Zac Murphy a very warm applause.
Thank you. And I just want to thank Dr. Mark for giving us the opportunity to be here today to present to you guys. It's certainly any opportunity we get to present to an audience, we'll jump at it. So today our paper's entitled Townsville Stronger Communities Action Group, Intensive Case Coordination of Families and Young People. It was authored by Zac Murphy, Mechelle Hofmann and Vicki Miles. Vicki and Mechelle are in the audience today, and hopefully Vicki will come down and assist Zac to present. She may not. Joe touched on earlier about the TSCAG, and we're going to delve a bit deeper into it today. The Townsville Stronger Communities Action Group, TSCAG, is a co-located collaboration of 7 senior representatives from different government agencies. TSCAG formed in late 2016 as a state government initiative to break the cycle of youth crime across the Townsville local government area. TSCAG's objective is to work intensively with young people and their families by coordinating the services that are supporting families to become positive contributors to the community and break the cycle of offending. TSCAG's targets include creating stronger ties with community groups and individuals to find innovative and efficient ways to work together to reduce youth crime. The actions of TSCAG are overseen by an executive committee who provide guidance in the TSCAG operational responsibilities identified in the Queensland Government's 5-point plan to reduce crime in Townsville. This paper explores the strategic alignment of the group considering the intent of the Government's 5-point plan to reduce crime in Townsville. The 5-point plan outlines the key responsibilities of the group to provide intensive coordination to families and young people at risk of entering the criminal justice system. This paper explores the key aims of TSCAG, the various legal provisions that relate to the group's operations, and the theories and assumptions that underpin the group's efforts to coordinate services through application of the Stronger Communities Engagement Plan, also known as SCEP. The entire project is an example of working outside the usual scope of statutory authorities, whereby senior representatives come together to work in a voluntary manner with people experiencing significant challenges in their lives. This paper will also discuss the key achievements of the group, accompanied by a SWOT analysis of the SCEP process before culminating in some recommendations that the group plan to make the Stronger Communities Executive Steering Committee. I'll hand over to Zac.
Thanks, Matt. So last year we had the opportunity to come here as well, and we presented a bit of a snapshot which Inspector Doyle was actually providing to a lot of community organisations. So it's great to be invited back here and to share a little bit of our reflections upon the first couple of years that our group's gone through, and particularly in relation to the case coordination around families and what some of the learnings that we've achieved and how we've moved that through the executive committee and how government has started to respond to that. So the Townsville TSCAG has been established to respond to youth crime in a Townsville local government area, specifically to get young people back on track and to lead more positive lives. TSCAG reports directly to the Executive Steering Committee, which is made up of the directors and executive directors of our various departments. And we do that so that we can work towards actioning components of the state government's 5-point plan for reducing crime. The 5-point plan, which has been mentioned in a couple of different presentations, was put together as an effort to address crime in Townsville by breaking the cycle of crime. The combination of the 5-point plan is the coming together of government to move beyond mere deterrence measures and demonstrates an intent to rethink criminal justice policies in North Queensland. The state government's 5-point plan to reduce crime in Townsville consists of the following components: targeted policing, which we've heard today, particularly from Inspector Kitching; increasing community involvement, which all the departments are trying to do in this space across the Townsville area; addressing the causes of crime; improving service delivery; and boosting jobs, training and education, which is some of the fundamental aspects of a healthy and vibrant community. As with any collaborative strategy, there are a number of tasks that various arms of government are focusing on. So what we're going to talk about today is just a little bit about what TSCAG has been tasked to do within that 5-point plan, which is just a fraction for our tiny little team of 7. So in the first point that we do have some involvement in, which Inspector Kitching did mention as well, is through targeted policing. We actually co-located at the Rapid Action and Patrols unit with the police and also with the Intel unit. And in that space, we're able to develop strategies how we can work together better. And some of the examples of that are just when there might be some bail problems where notifications of a change of bail address, etc., aren't occurring efficiently. The RAP team can come and talk directly to our team and link us straight back to YJ centres or to the Probation and Parole Centre. Or the Child Safety Centre, and we can try and find out what the cause of this gap was, where the hole in the net is, and try and mend it and get that net knitted a bit tighter. The second key point, addressing causes of offending. So this is where the primary role that we come into play is, where we provide integrated case coordination for selected young people and their families to increase economic participation by the family, reduce offending by the young people. While doing the coordination, we're also to develop appropriate structures and processes to provide intensive coordination. And we'll also identify service gaps that may need to be addressed. Also under addressing cause of offending, that for young people on youth justice orders, the Executive Committee, which is our bosses, will leverage relationships and processes that TSCAG develop across the community to support youth justice in their work and their case management across the community as well. And now, improving collaboration and service coordination. So the Executive will provide operational direction to TSCAG, assist with managing linkages and addressing roadblocks to integrated case coordination and ensure that work stays on track. So that upper Executive Committee that we report to is designed so that as we identify different challenges, as we're working with families in the sector, that we can hand those up to the Executive and then they can try and, within government, see what they might need to adjust with policy and funding to try and iron out those roadblocks. Or remove the roadblocks, iron out, so think a different metaphor. We provide primarily integrated case coordination and support to young people and their families, and in doing that is where we get our learnings from how the sector operates. Townsville YJ Steering Committee currently was run by the QPS, however will transition to TSCAG. That's sort of changed completely now. It's 2 years later, so things have changed a lot. In considering the above key areas, TSCAG is clear, of the 5-point plan where TSCAG has some involvement, it's key that we don't lead the majority of those. The key one that we are involved in is a coordination around families. And in that, the 4 key identified areas that we have the most focus are around increasing economic participation by the family, reducing offending by young people, developing appropriate structures and processes to support intensive coordination, and identifying service gaps that need to be addressed. So in light of that, one of TSCAG's first challenges was to develop an appropriate structure to try and coordinate services around families. And that's what led to the Stronger Communities Engagement Plan, or the SCEP process. And that provides a framework to coordinate service engagement with selected participants and their families. And the SCEP is a process that coordinates the services and goals wrapped around a family to provide succinct and coordinated model that maps the engagement of the sector with the selected participants and their families. And so the aim of this plan, the aim of the SCEP was to implement a whole of community coordinated response to address the offending risk created by children who are starting to display antisocial behaviours, children who are entrenched in the youth justice system, and young adults who are deeply entrenched in the criminal system. The work was to occur with the listed target cohorts, so that was 3 cohorts: vulnerable young people, those that are referred to us through youth justice, and those referred to us by probation and parole that are entrenched into the adult system. And because we're focused on youth, that was more that, the 17 to 20 age bracket. This coordination will result in the family and the participant endorsing a family goal plan. So the language here is similar to that used in the integrated case management. Most things within the case management frame focus on the family driving goals and that working collaboratively across the space. These family goal plans were designed to set out the goals that are both client-focused across all the agencies and services connected with that family, and that it's primarily based on what the family agrees to work towards. Part of the project includes an agreement by agencies to be held accountable for the delivery of approved actions associated with the family. The plan will underpin an approach that requires close working relationships and partnerships, effective communication, and a framework to collectively plan, implement, evaluate, and learn from our experience in attempting to help these families. The plan is intended to enable comprehensive and timely response from participating agencies and organisations to issues that are negatively impacting on the various participants and their families within each cohort. The model is designed to maximise the chance that the client will develop pro-social skills and capabilities to deal with the challenges set out before them, and the approach is premised on a fundamental understanding that prevention and intervention are the most effective methods of assisting an individual to utilise pro-social and contributory-based lifestyle. The model was founded on the following principles. So multiple agencies will work together to solve complex issues and work respectively towards achieving common goals. Partnerships will be built on accountability and shared responsibilities. Innovative responses will be used to create real change. Action learning will drive innovation and effective responses. And lessons learned will be shared, and models and practice will evolve. And that recognition of and respect for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture is critical for success when working with Indigenous young people and families. And the Xscape Model is outlined in a lovely flowchart, which really doesn't mean a lot to most people. On here, it basically goes through the cohorts, a bit of a screening process, a consent process, a planning and assessment process, connecting with right services, then reviewing that whole. So case management is effectively assess, plan, do, review in very smallest, shortest summary. So just having a quick chat around the legislative context that TSCAG operates in and which the SCEP was formed under. Well, as we mentioned earlier, it's a joint initiative between various Queensland State Government departments, and a number of legislative instruments are relevant to ensure that the various programs are coordinated correctly. The group includes a police inspector as lead government coordinator, with 6 senior positions from youth justice, child safety, housing, education, health, and the Department of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander partnerships. In addition to the members of the action group, the executive group also includes representatives from Corrective Services, Department of Premier and Cabinet, and the Department of Small Business and Employment. It's therefore within the scope of the group to encourage change regarding policies, procedures and legislation across all these areas. Some of the legislative instruments that are relevant to these areas include the following: the Youth Justice Act, 1992, Child Protection Act, Criminal Code, Penalties and Sentences Act, Bail Act, Education General Provisions Act, Housing Act, Health Act, Police Powers and Responsibilities Act, Information Privacy Act. That's just a couple of the main ones that we work around. And as you can imagine, with so many government departments that facilitate so many different pieces of legislation, there's so many options in there, things to manage and to consider when we look at what changes might be made, how policy could be adapted. The intensive case coordination is based upon a consent and sits outside the legislative powers that we may usually hold. So myself with Youth Justice, I usually work with Veronica in her office up the back there in Townsville South, and with Dave's crew in Townsville North as a team leader. So in that role we have our usual authority that is given to us by legislation. Within this process, we're very clear that regardless of whether it's policing, housing, child safety or anything else, we're working from a consent-based model, which is much closer to heart to our community organisations that we work closely with. The other thing that we want to do is, as such, involvement in the SCEP process is voluntary and accommodated by consent. And during the intake and the vetting process, we want to ensure that our involvement with the family does not hinder any actions that government agencies may be taking from a formal legislative process. So we don't want to upset the apple cart per se and upset our friends back, our home agencies. The aim of the the aim of doing this is to make sure that we protect people's rights to privacy, ensuring that information is only used as intended and expressly granted while not increasing the risk of detrimental impact on the family. TSCAG obtains consent from the parents and the guardians, and where appropriate, the child or children also provide assent to be involved in the process. So if we go back to those fundamentals about this being driven by the individuals involved, that also includes the children where they have capacity to provide that, and understand that if they're joining this, they're joining it on their own behalf and are prepared to engage in the process. Provisions for information sharing are disclosed to the families prior to obtaining consent. Systemic issues relating to information privacy were expressed within the TSCAG environment through the Memorandum of Understanding between the key agencies that formalise the following. So as you could imagine, you chuck 6 or 7 government departments together, we need lots of bureaucratic documents. So one of the first ones they did was a big old MOU based on information sharing, and that took months and months and months and months for all our legal departments to agree on it. And Inspector Doyle used to say that we should just lock up all the legal boffins in Brisbane, not let them out of the room until they agree on something. So I don't know if we could actually do that. It wouldn't make us any friends. But we ended up getting an MOU, and the key things that came from that was that information obtained through TSCAG will be stored within the TSCAG framework on the police network. That protects it there. And the second one was that where we do gather information, that it wouldn't be shared with home agencies unless through legislative means. And that protects people's rights to their own privacy and the purpose that it's used for. So some of the theories underpinning TSCAG and the SCEP process are outlined below. And these include, like, we have a client-focused approach, in which client-focused or person-centred practice is an approach formulated by psychologist Carl R. Rogers, premised on the notion that self-directed growth would develop a professional relationship characterised by genuineness, non-judgmental, caring and empathetic relationships. On a practical level, the person-centred approach is built on person-centred, client-focused, same sort of different, it's the same thing. Is built on trust that individuals or families can set their own goals and monitor the progress towards those goals. This approach is utilised by many government departments and is a fundamental requirement in the procurement contracts managed by Department of Child Safety, Youth and Women, and also Department of Housing and Public Works, in relation to provision of services that provide case management within our community, such as those offered by the Family and Youth Support Services, Act for Kids, and etc. These services are the most likely services for which we engage in when we look outside of our own and we look to the community for funded assistance from the funded sector. We also have a holistic approach. A holistic approach is looking at a person and their environment as a whole, giving them the responsibility, control, resources and support to assist them achieve their life goals, to facilitate change in their life that's important to them, and making sure we have a trusting relationship. Collaboration occurs with the people across all organisations and through their lives. So holistic, we're looking at their health, their spirituality, their well-being, their financial means, all those different sorts of aspects. Case management. So the case management process, and I'll just sit on this one for a little bit, because what we've found in our learnings is that the Case Management Society of Australia and New Zealand and its affiliates, since the mid-90s, has really identified that the term case management is used quite broadly across all sectors in Australia, and they're trying to bring it down to a key set of research-based fundamentals about what is case management. And so this is quite an important aspect. When anyone that thinks about case management, there is some fundamentally basics that define case management and what should be contained within it. So the case management process is defined as a process that involves screening, assessing, stratifying risk, planning, implementing, monitoring, transition, and evaluation. In its simplest form, case management involves a process of assessing, planning, doing, and reviewing, as I mentioned earlier. So, and that Case Management Society of Australia is a professional association seeking to formalise and standardise case management practices, and this includes the development of the national standards for practice for case management. Case management is also a fundamental component of the procurement contracts managed by various departments. Therefore, in designing the SCEP process, a fundamental assumption was made that the agencies required to implement case management. So considering case management set out in the services we purchase from the community, We move forward in our original design of what we're attempting to do with a certain understanding and definition of what case management would be provided by those services. Integration, collaboration and coordination. So the Queensland Council of Social Services defined these as the process of a number of service agencies working together to collaborate and coordinate their support, services and interventions to clients. As with client-focused approach, the task of integration, collaboration, coordination is also a fundamental component of the procurement contracts managed by various departments. An essential assumption of the TSCAG or Xscape process is that TSCAG could assist in this space by offering some coordination of particular families in an intensive manner that could lead to improved outcomes for clients. So for Criminology and YJ people, we've got risk needs responsivity model, and I believe that's also used in the adult area as well. The model of risk needs responsivity proposes that young offenders are assessed for both their risk of offending and their needs. And considering this assessment, resources and energy can be allocated in accordance to the level of risk and the needs of individual offenders. The Queensland Youth Justice System utilises the Youth Level Service Case Management Inventory 2.0, and that tool provides a gender-informed, culturally informed, strengths-focused risk needs tool that reliably and accurately classifies and predicts reoffending within male and female juvenile populations. However, I might add we haven't quite finished the standardisation for Queensland or Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander populations in Australia yet. The key domains that this looks at is the prior and current offences, orders and interventions, family circumstances, parenting, education and employment, the peer relationship structure, substance abuse, leisure, recreation, personality and behaviour, and their attitudes and orientations. Cultural capability. So when working with people from different cultural backgrounds, the most important considerations for practitioners is recognising individual preconceptions or prejudices. Practitioners must ensure the ongoing development of self-awareness to monitor for potential biases or stereotyping. Given the history of European colonisation of Australia, many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are untrusting of white institutions and social welfare organisations. Becoming culturally competent requires more than just an awareness of cultural difference. It's developing a personal sense of value and local knowledge in local cultural processes and protocols, and developing interpersonal skills for meaningful communication and interactions across different cultures. All right, so the next one we're moving into is SWOT. So a SWOT analysis is a methodology often utilised in analysing strategy of an organisation with consideration given to both internal and external factors. The outcomes can then be utilised to build on strengths, mitigate internal weaknesses, exploit external opportunities. Exploit's not a great word, that might change in later versions. And minimising the effects of external threats. The methodology does little to identify cause and effect of particular situations, however can trigger conversations regarding changes that may need to occur to maximise potential future benefits. And later in this document we'll utilise a SWOT approach just for the authors as we considered what we've been going through with the Xscape process. Another important one is action learning. Action learning, also known as action research, is a form of learning that embeds cycles of learning into structures of how a group or organisation attempts to solve complex problems, overcoming challenges as they arise. And in an organisational context, this can lead to changes in policy and practice. So if we engage in an action learning process, that means that we have an intent that we will engage in changed procedures and policies. So just to summarise, the key assumptions underlying the Xscape project that we went into, considering some of those theoretical perspectives, were based upon children being street checked by police provide insight into antisocial behaviour. Association with offending peers increases the risk of engaging in antisocial behaviour. Services are at risk of working autonomously where a lead government agency does not maintain a holistic case management framework. Children and families want to engage with services to help reduce antisocial behaviours and increase pro-social behaviours. Holistic case management is required in order to reduce delinquency, and holistic case management with therapeutic interventions are required in order to have an impact with moderate to high risk offenders. So conclusions and recommendations. The theme of this conference is Beyond Mere Deterrence, Rethinking Criminal Justice Policies for North Queensland. In light of this theme, the Townsville Stronger Communities Action Group has put together a reflection on the primary task allocated to the team by the Stronger Communities Executive Committee by means of the Townsville 5-point plan that set out 4 key outcomes being sought. So remember I mentioned earlier the four key outcomes that the government's asked us to focus on around families, and that's increase economic participation by the family, reduce offending by young people, develop appropriate structures and processes to support intensive coordination, and identifying service gaps that need to be addressed. In working towards the above, TSCAG was tasked to report back in an action learning model to the executive group regarding areas of policy that may be adjusted based on the learnings of the group as work towards coordinating families continued. So as we worked, we learnt, we fed up. To this end, TSCAG has made 31 recommendations to the executive group. While many of these recommendations relate to internal processes of government and systems, some relate specifically to enhancements that are aimed at benefiting the community and families more broadly. And they include, but are not limited to, investment in support services after hours, which resulted in things like the Lighthouse project coming to the fore, investment in a targeted family support service, which was procurement of a family support service that targets problem adolescent behaviours within a family home as opposed to just vulnerable behaviours of children in family homes. Investment in cultural artwork onto 2 police vehicles, which was utilised to assist in enhancing relationships across the community, and you may have seen them driving around town. Recommendation that the age requirements for youth-based support services were looked at to be shifted. Previously from 12 to 18 for youth support, looking at should this be a bit more flexible to go from 8 to 24 years. Development and implementation of a communication strategy to share the positive work done by the government and non-government services to reduce youth crime, and this includes the TSCAG website, Facebook page and Twitter account. Investment in the fitness mentoring program in the prison setting to assist with transitioning young adults from prison back to the community. An investment in women's group based at the Upper Ross Community Centre for some place-based enhancement in that area. So complementing those key outcomes from recommendations we've made to the executive are several additional projects that TSCAG embark upon to explore and learn about the challenges facing our community in Townsville, which include detection of vulnerable young people. So we look at identifying young people who are vulnerable to the needs of the community at the earliest possible time. One of those is the street check data that police hold. So that street check data can identify young children of 7, 8, 9 years of age, not yet in the criminal age by law, yet out at night doing with peers who are antisocial in nature and involved in at-risk behaviours. And so we can go and voluntarily connect with those families and refer them to support services where needed at a gently support approach and see what we can do to get them connected early. Place-based activities where we all get together, and we've done door knocks in certain high crime areas where there's been lots of community complaint. We door knock, we set up with council, we set up CCTV, we go in with police, housing, ourselves, and we see what we can do in those areas. And then as a collective unit, different agencies like housing might decide to make some changes around the density of housing in the area or what they might do with certain tenants. Police might be able to talk to certain households about people that are staying with them and help them keep unwanted people out of those households. Court early response service. So working with the court space, youth justice, NGOs, and connecting some early response services in the non-government sector into the court space, where families are not likely to be moving into the court with youth justice, but we can connect them with an appropriate service in the community. Community development, such as introduction of reconciliation action plans. The concept was introduced to a primary school, and also Sam, who was here, is also took up lead at helping the police with a RAP by the establishment of a First Nations reference group for the police in town here. We've got general sector engagement, including presenting aspects around collective impact, at the Queensland Youth Services Youth Forum that they ran, where they had a big PD session. So we contribute where we can in those sites as well. Housing and Public Works and Police work closely on calls for service to housing properties, identify tenants that might be under pressure and experiencing challenges, and see if we can go and support them and assist them to overcome those challenges. We've got the priority profile, where a number of the agencies in the justice response get together, and we look at trends around offending patterns, particularly for those under 24, and look at who are some of the prolific offenders and what are some of the most complex challenges facing them, and just check, are there any there that are not currently connected with key government services that are designed to help? And if not, is that something that TSCAG, and we go out and then check if they do need anything. Do they need to be connected to any supports? So as you can see, there's a bit of pattern here where we try and identify some gaps in the net, and we just try and fill that gently and with consent with the different families. Transition from custody, so meeting with the various people that work in the transition systems from both the youth justice space and also the adult sector, reporting back some of that information to the executive. We also assist by sitting on a DV integrated response. We have assisted with the Yinda Cultural Mentoring Program. They had a couple of projects where they wanted to get some cars to do up with the children as part of their mentoring process. And through our relationship across government, we were able to connect them with someone who might be able to help them with that, which was the police. Place-based activities, which continue, particularly around Stockland, which also maps some of the targeted policing that is done, where if there's large groups of youth hanging out at certain areas, we go out with some of the PLOs, with some of the RAP crew, and just ask questions, find out what's on these kids' mind, work with the security and the business side of the sector as well, and just try and think differently about the problem at hand instead of just arresting, because we know that doesn't particularly solve the problem. While the above gives a brief description of some of the diverse work that has been undertaken by TSCAG, the primary task allocated to the group was intensively coordinating services to families and children identified as most in need. The following section will present a strength, weaknesses, opportunity and threats analysis of what we've been doing with our coordination of families. So some of the strengths have been staff consistency on the action group, which has enabled the development of meaningful relationships with clients. So in some of the instances, the 2 years we've been running, our staff in our group have been the most stable across the sector, where some of the NGO places and some of the other services within government have had lots of turnover. Now that's no one's to blame for that in particular, it's just one of the facts of working in this industry, but it's something it is to a strength for a TSCAG in this space. Knowledge of the government and NGO sector and how these agencies interface, positional power and authority, because we do come from a high level within government, and political legitimacy. Is that right? Political legitimacy. There's a lot of political support behind TSCAG and what we're trying to achieve. In that space, we have some direct links from what we can learn as a group to the executive that work within government. Diversity and strengths of individual practice frameworks. It allows TSCAG members to view challenges through multiple practice lenses while sitting at the one table. This provides an opportunity to share these learnings with service providers. There's no other space within government or in the community where we have youth justice, child safety, housing, everyone sitting around a table. We can put a challenge on the table and view it from our practice lenses all into one space. Normally it might be at youth justice on their table, and they'll see that from a youth justice lens. So it's a fantastic space for looking at innovation by viewing things through different lenses. Bringing senior practitioners together from across Townsville enabled a sharing of knowledge of local families who may be experiencing challenges to enable a holistic perspective. Yeah, all right. Weaknesses, opportunities, threats, a couple of weaknesses, procedure complexity. We went into this and then we slid into doing some case management, which primarily was based on our original assumption about case management and what would be done. What is actually occurring is a lot more diverse than what we expected. So we've had some opportunities, threats, key recommendations to the point. So some of the key recommendations we'll take away to our executive is determine if TSCAG resources are best utilised duplicating case management tasks that are already funded to be done by the NGO sector. Working with government, non-government sector to clearly define case management, so defining case management with the sector so we have a shared understanding of what that means. Prioritise the diverse skill sets of TSCAG so that that ability to look at things from multiple lenses at once can be maximised. Prioritise and map the service sector across Townsville so we know exactly what's there, what's funded and where the gaps might be. And then we'll continue to pump any learnings that we get from working across the sector to the executive so that government as a whole can ultimately rethink the way they do their business, rethink our policies, and ultimately move away from deterrence and actually into prevention. Anyway, that was a snapshot.
Thank you so much.
Sorry about the duration.
Thank you very much.
You're
That
right.
was wonderful.